Good evening, Council, and welcome again to the Council meeting on Monday, December the 9th, 2024. Disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof, Council. Seeing none. The first item is presentations and delegations, the 20th anniversary of 48th Engineer Squadron, Waterloo. Mr. Ormson's going to introduce some of our guests.
Good evening, Chair Freeman, and tonight Honorary Lieutenant Colonel Freeman, Mayor McCabe, members of Council. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce two distinguished members of the 31 Combat Engineer Regiment, the Elgins, starting with the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel, excuse me, tongue-tied already. There's going to be some military jargon coming here. Lieutenant Colonel Scott Burke, CD, is the commanding officer of 31 Combat Engineer Regiment, the Elgins. He was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and raised in London, Ontario. He attended the University of Western Ontario, holds a double minor degree in philosophy and political science, and played varsity football for the Western Mustangs. I don't think the Golden Hawks and Warriors fans will hold that against you tonight, sir. In 1997, Lieutenant Colonel Burke enrolled in the Canadian Armed Forces Reserve at the age of 17 as a private with the 4th Battalion, the Royal Canadian Regiment, and has risen through the ranks to become a commissioned officer. In 2001, Lieutenant Colonel Burke deployed on Operation Palladium, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and in 2003, deployed as an infantry platoon, second in command on Operation Athena to Kabul, Afghanistan. And for those who may remember a little bit about recent Canadian military history, that was one of the first, if not the first, rotation of Canadian troops into Afghanistan, at least officially. Lieutenant Colonel Burke has completed significant additional training at bases across Canada and the United States, some of which includes the basic parachute course, the Rappel Masters course, Mountain Operations course, and the Army Tactical Operations course. In the civilian world, Lieutenant Colonel Burke is a sergeant with the London Police Service and is currently assigned to the Ontario Police College, where he teaches and mentors police recruits from across the province. By his side is a regimental sergeant major, a man I had the pleasure of serving with for over a decade. His name is Chief Warrant Officer Art Churcher, CD. Chief Warrant Officer Churcher joined 31 Combat Engineer Regiment, the Elgins, as a private in 1999. Since that time, he has risen to the highest non-commissioned rank in the Army, being a Chief Warrant Officer. He has numerous qualifications from the Canadian Forces School of Military Engineering at CFB Gagetown, New Brunswick, is a certified Red Seal welder, holds a diploma in military arts and sciences from Algonquin College. During his time with the forces, CWO Churcher has been an instructor on several courses at the Brigade Battle School in London, Ontario, at CFB Gagetown, New Brunswick, and has also participated in training at various bases in the United States. In 2005, he deployed to Afghanistan with a camp closure team and assisted the move of the Canadian contingent from Kabul to Kandahar. In 2010, he was assigned as the training warrant for the 48 Engineer Squadron Waterloo and fulfilled several other key roles with the regiment until becoming appointed as a regimental sergeant major in 2020. In the civilian world, CW Churcher has held various positions in industry, including as a production group leader at Cami Automotive. He is currently the London area territory manager for Lindy Canada. And I'd also like to note Lieutenant Aaron Mannery, another gentleman I had the privilege of serving with, also an Afghan veteran as well. Welcome, sir, to Waterloo. Thanks very much for coming down to mark the 20th anniversary of the squadron. It means a lot to the community.
Thanks, Ron. Good evening, Mayor McCabe and members of City Council. It is my distinct honor to be here this evening to recognize the 20th anniversary of the reactivation of the 48th Engineer Field Squadron in the city of Waterloo, and has been an incredible host to our squadron for that many years. During the land force restructuring of the Canadian Armed Forces Army Reserve in the early 2000s, the city was identified as a prime candidate to host an engineer squadron for several reasons, including the deep talent base provided by the post-secondary institutions, including the engineering powerhouse of the University of Waterloo. In many ways, it was a back-to-the-past decision, as the community had hosted the squadron several decades until deactivation in 1965. Since the reactivation of the squadron in 2004, the support offered by the city and the community has been outstanding. In 2006, the city of Waterloo was one of the first Ontario municipalities to introduce a reservist leave policy that was recognized by an award from the Canadian Forces Liaison Council. We have received broad local support from the public and other organizations such as the Grand River Conservation Area Authority, who have provided access to their lands for training, from the University of Waterloo, who have recognized military engineering as part of its co-op program, from the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 530, and the cadet establishments in the local area. Not to mention as well the numerous business and contractors that are in Waterloo. In 2016, City Council unanimously approved the installation of a LAV 3 monument at the Waterloo Cenotaph to recognize all the Canadian veterans who served in Afghanistan, including 14 combat engineers from Waterloo. Such support has been truly appreciated by the regiment. Over the years, other noteworthy things have included our involvement. Other noteworthy things that have included our involvement have been the reconstruction of Veterans Green, drainage improvements to Colonel Hugh Heisley Park, participation in the city's 150th anniversary parade, Oktoberfest parades, Mighty Machines, Ice Dog festivals, and many more. We've also had various DOMOPS exercises, which are domestic operations, which included other city emergency services. Special thanks to Waterloo Fire Chief Richard Heptich, who's here. And of course, granting the regiment the freedom of the city in 2009 when Lord Elgin, a storied World War II veteran, and the namesake of the regiment and the honorary colonel came to visit from Scotland. Last but not least, in 2021, City Councillor Diane Freeman, who is chairing tonight's meeting, became the first woman and professional engineer to be named our regiment's honorary lieutenant colonel. So on behalf of the regiment, the squadron, and all the ranks of 31 Sierra, I want to thank the city for your support over the last 20 years. Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to exchange certificates with Mayor McCabe. And Chair, if you'd like to join us too, that'd be great.
Do you want to switch? All right, I'm going to take one this way. If you don't mind, I'll do one this way also. Thank you.
If I can pose for one more thing as well. I mentioned that Diane Freeman, one of your colleagues, very important to the regiment. Tonight I'd like to also present her with her commissions one is supported and was during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. So quite an excellent document, very important to an officer's career, and I'd like to take this moment in front of Diane's colleagues to present it to her.
Oh, we got paperwork for you to sign too.
Amazing. Thank you. You can just leave it if you want. Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks again, Council, and Mayor McCabe for the time.
If I could just briefly say thank you very much for the service over the past 20 years, and congratulations to Councillor Freeman, and thank you to Commissioner Ormson for your service as well. Thanks for arranging this.
Thank you. So with the council agenda, we're moving on to formal public meeting 9A. This is a formal public meeting to consider item 9A, zoning bylaw amendment Z 2405, 4 units, 4 stories, the corporation of the City of Waterloo citywide. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate register in the binder located on the desk at the rear of the council chambers. If there is more than one binder, please make sure you are signing the appropriate one. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on November 21st, 2024, and emailed on November 19, 2024 to all public agencies and to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on March 25th, 2024, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you. The planners, Tristan DeVoe and Adam Zaffarelli, will now give a brief overview of the application.
Thank you very much, Chair Freeman. We're here to present the zoning bylaw amendment Z 2405 to establish as of right 4 units and 4-story development in the City of Waterloo. So we'll step through a brief presentation going over the amendments before turning it over for questions. And to start with, I will hand it off to Adam.
Thank you, Tristan. So a bit of a background about where the 4-unit and 4-story work comes from. So in October of 2023, Waterloo City Council supported a motion to allow up to 4 units and up to 4 stories throughout low-rise residential neighborhoods. And in February of 2024, the City of Waterloo received $22 million in funding from the Government of Canada through the Housing Accelerator Fund initiative, through which the City of Waterloo intends to proceed with several housing-focused initiatives. A zoning bylaw amendment to permit up to 4 units is one of the initiatives from the Housing Accelerator Fund.
All right, so I'm just going to go over a kind of high-level overview of the general changes that we're proposing. Of course, the council report, the staff report that is before you has the complete layout of what's being changed. Because the changes do go through a lot of the bylaw, there are quite a few individual amendments, but a lot of them are repetitions of the same ideas. So first and foremost, the main intent of the amendments is to allow up to 4 dwelling units on every service lot in the low-rise residential area. So through these changes, we've changed some of the definitions in the zoning bylaw to reflect various built forms, the different ways that 4 units could be configured on a property, and then allow that in all of our low-rise residential zones. Increasing the maximum building height. So currently, the zoning bylaw allows 10-meter maximum building heights, which roughly equates to a 3-story building. Part of the work that we were undertaking was to look at allowing 4-story development. So we picked the height of 13.5 meters to facilitate that. And We arrived at that number through industry consultation, basically to allow the flexibility to actually achieve a 4-story built form and provide some flexibility to actually make sure that these regulations are actually implementable by the industry. There's a couple nuances to that where the 13.5 meter maximum height only applies to buildings that have 4 units in it. So if a building doesn't have 4 units, the 10 meters still applies. And we've also put a regulation in place to clarify that the roof typology has to be flat roofed, just to lower the overall height if a peaked roof building would extend a bit beyond. So just to, the flat roof design was a regulation that we put in just to keep that, that building envelope within that 13.5 meters. Multiple changes are being proposed for coach house regulations with the intent of making them more flexible, removing barriers to develop these. So one big thing of note is allowing coach houses to be built to 2 stories or 6 meters now. Currently it's 4.5 meters is the maximum height of a coach house, so we're proposing to increase that, basically to allow that kind of loft style development, or if you're converting a garage, for example, having a unit above. We're looking at proposing to reduce the parking requirements for all additional residential units. So whereas the bylaw now requires 1 parking space per unit, tweaking those numbers a little bit where the first 2 units each require parking space, 3rd unit requires, only requires 2 parking spaces, and then the 4th unit requires 3 parking spaces. Generally removing barriers to ARUs. So currently the regulations have floor area caps of 40% of the principal dwelling, as well as a few other miscellaneous regulations such as restricting additional entrances on the front and flankage facades. So we're removing a lot of those regulations just again to try and make these, reduce the barriers associated with developing these. And then throughout the bylaw, there's various definitions and other regulations that we're proposing to amend, again, to consolidate definitions that are no longer needed, as well as update references and the like to reflect the changes that we've proposed throughout the bylaw. And I'll pass that back to Adam.
One thing that we would like to note is the precedence of existing development in a variety of built forms throughout Waterloo's low-rise residential neighborhoods. So on the slides before you, you can see an example of an existing triplex building with a coach house, an existing triplex building where there are multiple front doors on the bottom right corner, for example, and then an existing 4-plex building where there's been an addition onto the home into the rear yard. So these are all examples of building forms that we are looking to enable through this work, up to 4 units. For example, the zoning bylaw as existing today does not permit more than 1 front door on a building, but there are examples of existing buildings that do not comply with that regulation in the city of Waterloo, and we are looking to enable that type of development once again. And on the next slide, you can see some examples of existing 3.5-story buildings where there are vertically separated units, up to 4 units in the buildings themselves. So the typology of a 4-unit, 4-story building is rare in Waterloo today, partially because it has not yet been allowed by zoning, but there are some existing similar typologies within the city that coexist within the city's low-rise residential neighborhoods. And as for engagement, staff have received feedback from the public at various engagement sessions throughout 2024. So on March 25th, we held an informal public meeting here in council chambers. On October 19th, we held a pop-up engagement in Waterloo Public Square, where we were visited by members of the public. And then on October 30th, we held a virtual public meeting. Yes, there are some familiar faces at the October 19th pop-up. Yeah, on October 30th, we held a virtual public meeting where we engaged with the public and residents. And then we've also conducted engagement through tools on the Engage Waterloo page, such as surveys, forum responses, and Q&As. So the recommendations that are before council tonight are that council approve staff report IPPW 2024-045, and that council approve city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment Z-24-05 4 units, 4 stories, as set out in Appendix A to report IPPW 2024-045. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Does any councillor have any questions for staff? Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm just curious what the uptake has been like on the triplex as of right to date. Can you give us a sense of that?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Wright. So we've seen a lot of uptake on the traditional kind of second unit. The 3 units which are still relatively new regulations. We've not yet seen a lot of uptake on those. We've had I can think of a committee of adjustment application recently that was proposing 3 units, but that hasn't gone through to building permit yet. So it's still, as of yet, we still haven't received a lot of uptake. We're expecting it'll slowly kind of ramp up as these regulations age in place a little bit. But the general trend of additional units has been increasing over the years, so we expect to see more be proposed and come online, especially as we remove barriers.
May I continue? Okay. So just thinking about that, I mean, from the sounds of it, not a mad rush. So it would probably be a slow and steady progression as people begin exploring the process and become familiarized. I do have a question about the impact on stormwater. So in the report, it talks about a concern regarding the sort of hardscaping that accompanies more intensification. And there's a note about the minimum landscaped area and that being something that might need to need attention as fourplex applications come forward. And so I'm just curious whether we've already explored what kinds of things besides having a minimum, whether there are some low impact development features that could accompany fourplexes, whether that's considered at this point, or education on our stormwater rebate program and ways that runoff can be mitigated at the property level, if there's any sort of lot level sort of mitigation that is foreseen as part of this. And the reason I ask is because already with infill development where it's just a large home, where the square footage has changed significantly, we are seeing, the drainage issues between lots, and then that becomes a civil matter that has to be dealt with. And for adjacent homeowners, that is a considerable burden. So I'm just trying to get a sense of that.
Through you, Councillor, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Wright. So as part of these amendments, there is an increase. There is an increase of a lot coverage, and that's coming in as in part due to changes to provincial legislation and regulation that's requiring a 45 that municipalities can't require a lot coverage maximum of less than 45% for any property that has an additional residential unit. So that's something we incorporated into this. As far as the impact of that on stormwater, so we did consult with our engineering department when we're drafting these regulations, just as a general response. stormwater systems are, monitored and assessed over time, and as you alluded to earlier, we're expecting this to be incremental change in neighborhoods. So this is something that we can monitor going forward as more infill development comes online. And as you also alluded to earlier, these are relevant discussions no matter what scale of infill we're talking about, whether someone's just expanding their existing house or adding additional units. So it's something that we can monitor over time. As far as on a per lot level, a lot of that is handled at building permit. There is requirements to address stormwater as part of a building permit application, things like looking at pre and post development runoff amounts and things like that. So it is something that is examined through the regular development process.
Okay, thank you for that. I have one last question. I'm just curious, so one of the other considerations that was brought up frequently during the engagement process was parking and the potential for parking pressures. And I'm wondering at what point conceivably would that tip into a need for on-street permit parking should we get to the point where there's quite a bit of intensification. And I fully acknowledge that this is likely a slow and steady process of intensification. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Wright. Yeah, similar to my last response and to what you alluded to, we are expecting these to be slow incremental changes, so we can monitor if there becomes, if certain areas of the city start having difficulty accommodating parking. It's something that we can look at over time and reassess if there's issues and looking at other solutions.
Okay, thank you. I'm just noting also the difference, like Ward 7 shares a border with City of Kitchener, and so already in that Midtown neighborhood that has intensification, residents frequently note the difference in parking rules between Kitchener and Waterloo. So I'm just conscious of that.
Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair Freeman, thank you, Tristan and Adam, for your presentation and responses to Councillor Wright's questions. I'm going to keep on the parking question. There are a number of us that share borders with Kitchener and also have the same challenge. In more of the suburban areas, everyone is understanding that the intensification needs to happen, and the opportunity to look at the number of units that are on particular lots, I think will go, and I agree with you, it'll probably be a slow process. One of the things that I'm continually hearing, though, and in many of the neighborhoods in my wards, there is not much room on a cul-de-sac to have additional parking. And if we get into a spot where we're having parking on the streets, the snowplows won't be able to get through, nor will any of our services. So I'm just curious how we're going to manage that. The lot sizes are the correct size for adding additional units, but if you've got a reverse pie lot, for example, on a cul-de-sac, you only have one driveway. Just your thoughts on that, please.
So through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Hamner. So when we're looking at these regulations, obviously that there is a lot of different things, interests to weigh. One consideration is we're reducing the minimum required parking. That does not preclude any particular property owner from providing more if they feel that that's something that would benefit future tenants on their site. Mm-hmm. The regulations as a whole, the major intent was to make to remove barriers for developing additional units, and acknowledging the fact that while there are residences and there are properties that require additional parking, there are people who need housing who don't have a car and don't require that parking, and so there's a little bit of balancing between those two scenarios.
I appreciate that. However, in many of our more urban, suburban areas, The transportation is not as good as it is in, public transportation is not as good as it is in the uptown area. So just wanting us to make sure that we're considering all parts of the city as we're looking at these regulations going forward. And again, the intensification, we can only move up. We need to look at, be creative, and I like the idea. It's just in some of our area neighborhoods, I think we need to have a bit more consideration of what is currently there from an infrastructure standpoint and what we're going to be able to accommodate. I'm thinking of what's going through my head right at the moment is the street that I live on, and if we had anybody put additional units, we would be parking on the street. There's just nowhere for anything else to go. So just to have us be able to respond to residents who want to do it, but yet we are going to be challenged with parking. Thank you.
Other questions, Council? Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Adam and Tristan, for your report. I do have a couple of questions. A couple have already been asked and answered, so that's really great. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about, for low-rise residential, like if there's any consideration for shadow impact. And I understand it's not super high, but I also know that there is that concern generally with large-scale developments as well as something a little smaller.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Rowe. When we discussed internally and with our urban design team talking about potential shadow impacts, the staff's opinion was that the increase in height to 4 stories would be minimal in its impacts. Part of the when we look at shadow impacts on larger development sites, we're often talking about development buildings, even if they're of a similar height, that are across multiple lots, and just in general a larger scale, even though the height may be comparable. With this infill development, we're still talking about development on individual parcels, so there's still space between buildings, the shadows get broken up. So while an increase in height obviously will have some impact on shadow on the adjacent properties, it's staff's opinion that these will be minimal.
Thank you, that's helpful. So basically with the, what you're saying is like there will be ample space in between for the light still to come through.
Yes, so the side yard setbacks and those design or development regulations that are in place in the zoning bylaw have not been proposed to change for the main building. So yeah, the space between buildings is being maintained.
Awesome. Okay, I do have a couple other questions. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how the proposed zoning bylaw ensures canopy protection, because with these, if this was to be infill development starting over in building 4, we're looking in low-rise residential areas where I think it's 75% of the city's canopy is on private property. And so how can we ensure that the canopy cover is preserved, and what that looks like?
Through your Chair Freeman to Councillor Rowe. So this is certainly a concern, not just with 4-unit redevelopment, but with any, as you alluded to, any infill development. Yeah, even, be it someone just expanding their house or tearing down their house, building a new house. The impact of private trees is certainly something that's I know concerns a lot of neighbors. So currently the city does not have a tree bylaw that speaks to trees on private property. City staff is undergoing an urban forestry strategy, and that's something that's being examined through that process. So any eventual regulations likely would not appear in the zoning bylaw. It would likely, if this was something that the city wanted to pursue, it would likely come in the form of some sort of tree bylaw to then regulate, what happens with privately owned trees for any sort of construction and infill.
Great, thank you for clarifying. Let me just check, because I know my questions were answered as well. Can you talk a little bit about accessibility? Because I understand that accessibility isn't in the zoning bylaw, but can you just talk a little bit about that from a provincial perspective?
Through your Chair Freeman to Councillor Rowe. So yes, your understanding is correct. Accessibility regulations slash standards are contained within the Ontario Building Code. Planning staff are not prepared to give an opinion on the Ontario Building Code at this time, but we are prepared to consult with the chief building official in regards to accessibility standards and what is required under the code, what would be required for, say, a 3-story building versus a 4-story building. And we will respond to you following this meeting.
Excellent, thank you so much.
Other questions, Council? Mayor McCabe?
The mayor has ceded her time to me. Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman. I wanted to pull on the thread that Councillor Rowe was talking about with respect to accessibility, and one of the reasons, to my understanding, of looking at fourplexes at the 4-story height was that it permitted, how should I put this, more livable conditions for basement units and greater accessibility potential within those units. And I'm wondering if maybe you could speak to that a little bit for those that choose to do the 4-story height in a fourplex.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Bodley. Certainly one of the reasons to look at permitting 4 stories as opposed to a 3.5. It would be to have a building typology that allows for an at-grade entrance on the first story, which certainly could help make, in the very least, that first unit more accessible. Whether it meets the definitions of accessibility, that's more what's up to building code, as far as any other requirements, such as for an elevator or not. But certainly, yeah, the permissions to allow a 4-story as of right would make it easier to build that type of typology where you can have an at-grade access to the first story of the building.
Mayor McCabe, did you have questions?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you both for the report and the information and for doing this work. And it was, I found it, I don't really have a question, it's more of a comment, but I found it interesting to read through the comments that people sent in on Engage, and some people obviously were not in favor of it, and I think we've heard some of the reasons why. People have questions about parking and tree canopy and drainage. Obviously, that's a really important one, and the runoff, and I think those are things that we need to really manage really carefully, because we don't want to create problems further down the road that would create, conflicts between neighbors and things like that, because occasionally that happens already just with rebuilds. But reading through this report, I was also just reflecting on a couple of things that, when you go around the entire city like we did when we campaigned, or, you go around the city as we do as elected officials, and you see different neighborhoods, and you see places like you showed in the slides where these type of homes already exist. And for whatever reason, we stopped building them or stopped allowing them. And so it's kind of going back to everything that's old is new again. But I remember particularly campaigning through some of our suburban areas, which have really great neighborhoods, and particularly seniors saying a number of times, I love my neighborhood, I want to stay here, but I want to downsize, but I don't have any place to go within my own neighborhood. Like maybe for various reasons they didn't want to buy a condo and live in Uptown or whatever the case may be. They wanted to stay in their neighborhoods, but they didn't have options for staying there. So I think these probably, as you said, there will be incrementally added into neighborhoods, but I think this is partly a really good answer to particularly some of the seniors that I heard over and over again saying, I really wish there was something smaller. I could sell my home, my 3, 4, 5-bedroom home in some cases, and downsize to something that's more manageable for a couple or a single individual. So I think this is really good work. I think it's really important, and, you know, I know it's tied to our Housing Accelerator Fund, and so there's sort of like a bit of a, like, we really have to do this in order to continue to receive that money and do all the really good things that we are doing with it, like our announcement last week with 2025 University Avenue. But I think this is also something, regardless of the Housing Accelerator Fund, that we probably needed to think about doing regardless. So we really appreciate the federal government coming to the table with this and adding the incentives. But anyway, I didn't mean to speak quite so long, but I just, you know, reflecting through this, I just think this is hopefully an answer for a lot of those seniors who said time and time again, I want to stay in my neighborhood, but I don't have any options to stay here. So hopefully we will start to see some of those options be built in the relatively near future. Thanks again for your work on this.
I understand Councillor Rowe has one more question.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, I forgot to ask one question. And I wondered if you can advise if an applicant, if they wanted to do an infill, could apply for a zoning bylaw amendment to go beyond 4 stories.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to Councillor Rowe. So the zoning bylaw for the low-rise residential doesn't speak to stories, it only speaks to meters. So potentially someone could come for a variance or a zoning bylaw amendment to increase the number of the height, 13.5 to 14, whatever it may be. But the official plan amendment, the official plan policies that came into effect through OPA 58, which was just seen by council last week, specify that 4 stories is the maximum height allowed in low-rise residential areas. So staff would not be in a position to support height increases that would allow for an additional story without an official plan amendment.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question with regard to the residential 3 zoning. If it's an unserviced lot, how does that work? Because I think that in the past, we've tried to limit increasing the size of septic beds just because of the potential environmental inflow from septic into shallow groundwater systems.
Thank you, Chair Freeman. So the requirements for additional residential units, regardless of the form they take, whether it's in a principal building or in a coach house, are for it to be on a fully serviced lot. So that's what the as-of-right permissions are. If someone was on a partially serviced lot or entirely on private services and they wanted to look at adding density through an additional residential unit or a coach house, they would require relief from those regulations, at which point we would ask for, you know, confirmation that the private services had capacity and all those kind of due diligence checks.
Okay, thank you. I believe that we still don't allow severances of unserviced land, right? Is that correct? To do multiple units on a lot, like,
Through you, Chair Freeman, in response to create an additional lot, you would generally be correct. We do allow some division of land, but not for the purposes of creating a second lot.
okay, that's great, thank you. Any other questions, council? Okay, so we have some delegations with us this evening. So I'll now ask registered delegations to come forward. And just need to find my right piece of paper. So our first delegate, I wanted to point to your attention to that Mr. Ashfield has included correspondence in your note, but he's also planning to delegate later. So our first delegation is Tyler Ulmer, who's the Vice President, Development, Cabanovo Housing. Welcome. And you have 10 minutes.
Awesome, thank you. So thanks for the introduction. Tyler Ulmer, Vice President of Development at Cabanovo Housing. We're a new company with our manufacturing facility actually in Waterloo. We're a vertically integrated development company focusing on missing middle housing typologies, the primary one being fourplexes. So we do prefabricated modular, so it's built in a factory and shipped to site. Like I said, fourplex is our sort of primary design type. 3 units as of right has been around for a while, but we're unable to make triplexes work. Obviously development is very expensive and triplexes just didn't have enough upside to be feasible, where a fourplex starts to get into the realm of feasibility. At Cabanovo, we're focused on mid-market products, so not luxury, really family-oriented units. So we have a very high interest in this proposal and very strongly supportive of it. We definitely know the challenges to building missing middle housing types, and this proposal is an amazing change that really helps encourage and will help us build missing middle housing types. Also personally, like I'm a renter in Waterloo, and I see like the lack of options in communities that I want to live in. So I also personally am really supportive of this because I can see how the communities I want to live in could benefit and there could become a more diverse choice of housing options in those areas. Oh, too fast. There we go. So 4 units as a right. That can mean a lot of different things. It could be like a conversion of an existing house, a renovation, backyard homes. But in our eyes, the optimal version of it is a purpose-built fourplex, and that's what you see the 2 options on the right. The other options are good, they should exist, but they're fairly specialty. It's really hard to do financially, like you kind of have to have owned the home for a long time. It's really expensive to do. You need a really sort of special lot to make it work, where a purpose-built fourplex, especially at 4 stories, it's really the same floor area as an old house, so you're not really encroaching on the land at all. You're really replacing it with something new that can meet energy goals. It can be accessible and can be really family-oriented. So some benefits of purpose-built fourplex development. First one, you can make them fully accessible. That's where 4 stories becomes really important because you can get that main floor at grade, and then it also gives you some options for elevators. Climate resiliency, because we're building these new, they're built to new standards. So we're often tearing down older homes that don't really have insulation. They have very old heating systems, and we're replacing them with something that's very efficient, beats energy codes. And in some cities, there's even green energy standards, and we often are very beyond those. They also provide a human scale density. So what I mean by that is kind of like the European model. So you can put these in a neighborhood and it doesn't change the neighborhood at all, but it starts to add sufficient density where that neighborhood can support further amenities and services. This scale of development and construction can be a lot cheaper. I see roughly 25% cheaper than comparable product types at higher densities. And that gives the opportunity to start lowering some costs to the end user, the tenant. We can also deliver homes up to 6 times faster using conventional construction. And then companies such as ours that use modular, that can go up to 12 times faster than higher densities. They also really make family-oriented units easier to build. That's just because of the building type. In conventional higher density buildings, you often have a hallway that kind of splits the building in half, and you only have windows on one side in each unit. At this smaller scale, you have 1 unit per floor, wraparound windows, so it's much easier to do 3 and even 4 bedroom units. Some challenges to building these prior to this 4 units, 4 stories proposal. So high development costs, strict policy. So before things like 4 units as of right, you're really not allowed to do this type of development on many properties. So the choice is either find ones where the zoning allows you to do it, which those typically, because they're so rare, they kind of signal a higher density and they end up going through like a zone change and being built at a much higher density, or trying to do a zone change on a smaller property. Which also takes a long time and it's risky. And like I mentioned at the start, these projects are very marginal. Because they're smaller, they don't have as big of profits or like just the size to absorb extra costs that higher density projects do. So going through any sort of entitlements or public process really is too risky. That timeline just can't be absorbed by small infill projects. So onto Waterloo's 4 units, 4 stories proposal. We've seen a lot of cities, either they're underway of adopting four units as of right, or they've already adopted it. And the way they've adopted it has varied pretty wildly. So on the left, I've got what a number of other cities have adopted and what we could build under that versus what Waterloo's proposing, and it really shows how great of a vision they have for this 4 units, 4 stories proposal. So on the left, we can do 2 1-bedroom units and 2 3-bedroom units, versus on the right, just getting that extra full story to 4 stories lets us do 4 3-bedroom units. Obviously, obviously 1-bedroom units are important, but they're typically pretty well served by higher density types. So I really like using this where there's benefits to doing 3-bedroom units to really focus on that, and getting that extra height lets us do more 3-bedroom units. The one on the left, it's not accessible. When you have below ground units, your main floor isn't at level with grade, so you end up having stairs into each unit, sort of stacked townhouse style, versus on the right, when it's 4 stories above ground, it can be fully accessible. You can make that main floor level with grades. You can go right in, and then it also gives the opportunity for an elevator, so you can really have 4 fully accessible units. On the left again, below grade units, not optimal for living in, versus on the right, you get that full floor living all above grade, much more livable. And most of that really comes through the height. So some additional considerations, just things that could make building these even more popular. The single exit stair solution, obviously that comes from the province. I'm not expecting it to be changed here, but that has a really big impact on the design typologies we can use. Development charge reduction, I'm also not going to ask for that here, but some other cities have looked at for 5 units or less, or 4 units of less or less, reducing or shifting development charges. Modernized front and rear yard setbacks, seen in some cities, they've kind of just remained what they are because that's what they've always been. So just looking at that, it's a new form of development, does it make sense to adjust them? And scaling options, so this one can be a little confusing to picture, but there's kind of a fault with 4 units as of right, where if you have a double wide unit, or you buy, a double wide lot, or you buy 2 properties that are next to each other and they merge into 1 property, you have the width to have 2, but because it's 1, you're only allowed to do 4 units. So finding a way around that could be good, where you don't have to go through a severance to the land. So I've seen some areas where they
just want to give you a 1-minute warning.
Thank you. Where they do it 4 units per lot width. And then flexible side yard setbacks as well. That's around like scaling to an 8-plex. So if you have that double wide unit, double wide lot, you can do 2 4-plexes on it and maybe like shift the side yards to the outside. So you're still having the same total side yard, but you can kind of build it as an 8-plex now. So just like I said at the start, really supportive of this. I think it's a great policy, great vision, and it will help us build a really needed housing type. And that's all.
Great, thank you very kindly. Any questions for the delegate? Seeing none? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Actually, I'm just curious about sort of your model. So you build, and are you also then the applicant and land purchaser? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so completely vertically integrated. So basically every step of the way is us. So we buy land, produce these building modules in a factory for ourselves, ship them to the site, and then we rent out the building and manage it ourselves as well.
That was going to be my next question. Thank you.
Just taking over the chair momentarily here for Councillor Freeman. Does anybody else have any questions of the delegate? Go ahead.
Sorry, Chair Bodley. I do have one more. Do you have any examples, or are you working on anything in the city? Well, I know you're waiting for 4, but
Yeah.
is there anything in the pipeline should this zoning bylaw amendment get passed this evening?
There's definitely things in the pipeline, not in Waterloo yet. That could change tomorrow morning, maybe. But definitely in Kitchener and some other nearby cities. All under construction right now or in progress right now. But there should be examples of it very soon.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you, Tyler. We have one other registered delegate. It is Brooke Ashfield. Come on up to the podium there. And if you could state your name and your city of residence, you will have 10 minutes for your delegation.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I'm a regular attender at council meetings about once every 10 years, and this is my turn. My name is Brooke Ashfield. I'm a resident of Waterloo, the city, since 1989, when we moved into 49 Margaret Avenue South in Waterloo. I was a little disappointed when I noticed my letter did not make it into the updated packet. It was in the original packet, but I did not see it there. Is that? So I think I'd like to read it because it's not available to be read at the moment unless you've got copies of it. And then I'll say a few words and then I'll be done. Okay?
Just for clarification, Mr. Ashfield, we all did get your correspondence, but you're welcome to,
Okay.
in the original packet, not the updated packet.
So it was in the original packet, but it's
Yep.
not in the updated packet.
Yep.
Where the other ones were. So
Yep. But you're welcome to still
you
provide
read it
your
and memorized it.
correspondence.
That's great. Good for you. I guess I really want to just say I've lived, oh, forget that. I can't read that. Living in Waterloo for 35 years, a joy, a privilege. I've lived in many different places. I've been in every corner of this city in one way or another. For 31 years, I was a minister at Knox Church, Waterloo, corner of Urban Caroline, where we used some of the pre-construction work that was done, and a lot of our walls came in on cranes and were perfectly, with laser-guided precision, put into place for an accessible, highly efficient church building of 24,000 square feet. So that's, if it works in a church, it's going to work in houses. For 15 years, I played hockey at Albert McCormick Arena. I grew up in suburban Ottawa in a house built in 57. I went to high school downtown. I am pulled towards diversity all my life. I liked downtown. And the biggest ethnic group in my high school downtown in Ottawa were Italians. And I had envy of their lunches every day. They just had the most glorious lunches. And they seemed to want my peanut butter sandwich for some reason. So I made some great deals. Then we moved, Linda and I got married. We moved to Toronto for grad school after graduating from Carleton University. Lived on a street, Robert Street, 288, 1 block west of Spadina, just south of Bloor. Wonderful street, had to park on the road, had to go to City Hall to get a $5 a month, it shows you how my age, right? $5 a month cost for city parking in Toronto. Try getting that again. It was fun. Everywhere we've been, we liked it. We had good neighbors. Our neighbor we were in the top floor of a house in a 1-bedroom where people were walking down the streets every day, where there were inebriated students from the University of Toronto, noticeably the football team on some nights, and we got used to a very loud city tempo close to the sirens, and then when we graduated, we were sent to Grey County and lived in Chatsworth, population 300 people. And a month after we moved into our 4-bedroom house from our tiny one-bedroom apartment. We were gifted with lots of furniture, fortunately. The local hardware store burnt down. And the bell for the fire, thank you for that, for the fire station was less than 50 meters from our bedroom window. And everyone in the town was there, and we slept through it. Why? We just moved from downtown. We slept better when we heard sirens. Now, we did adapt. And we moved back to Toronto and lived in a 20-foot frontage on Ravenna Crescent, 300 meters from the Donlan subway station. We loved it there, great neighbors, front porch living, back lane living. Our best friends are still living there. We moved to Waterloo in 1989. We spent 8 years there. We loved it. That street is continuing to change in diversity. It has laneway houses now, and there has been nothing but good things happen to the neighborhood in Toronto. But we're in Waterloo now, and in I get my centuries right. In 2019, I had a hip replaced, and my physiotherapist said, you need to walk, because it was really, really bad. And so my dog came up to me and said, walk. So we have walked all over Waterloo. And we like neighborhoods where there's people. We like neighborhoods where there's diversity. We like walking through the students' neighborhoods where people like dogs. And this dog likes people. And we like shopping at Wordsworth, who has liver treats for dogs. Did you know that? We're really happy where we are, and this is great, and I'm going to move along, blah, blah, blah. We live on a nice big lot, but we have no plans to have any more additions because we're in our 70s now, and we have grandchildren, and we're using a large home well with having grandchildren and family over every weekend. And so we have no energy yet to invest in putting in more housing, but I'm utterly in favor of it. The house next door was torn down, 2 net zero houses were put up. The result was more children in school, more nice neighbors. I want to congratulate the planning department for including an addition of moving from 12 meters to 13.5 meters in height, because that was one of my comments I was going to talk about, because that allows for more steep roofs, better stormwater management with French drains. We have 5 of them on our house, and tree canopy, and less landfill from flat roofs, which produce more landfill than the sloped roofs. So overall, this is a good plan, and it can be tweaked in different ways, which I have confidence it will happen. I can say a lot more, but this is good, and people are more resilient than we think, even me. So that's what I got to say. So thank you.
Thank you very kindly. Any questions for the delegate? No. Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through your chair, Freeman. I just don't think we could let you come here and not give a comment back from council. At least we have, I know you said you only come here once every 10 years, but I'm sure based on that delegation, the rest of council would encourage you to maybe up that frequency. We have some folks here in the audience who come a lot to council, and that's no slight on them at all. We love hearing them as well too, but you're welcome to come to council anytime and up that frequency once every 5 years, once every 2 years maybe. Little more frequency, because that was a great delegation. We appreciate you coming tonight.
I'll see if my dog will allow me to get out. Thank you for what you're doing. Politicians get too much grief, and just thank you. because nobody says it enough.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else present this evening who would like to speak to this application? Please provide your name and municipality of residence for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Ashwin Annamalai. I'm a resident of the city of Waterloo. First of all, thank you so much. Back-to-back phenomenal housing proposals are coming to the table. I really love the 1,010 homes at 2025 University Avenue. Phenomenal job staff, phenomenal job council. Like, I had to pinch myself to see like if it was a dream. It was so good. It was really good. And coming to the fourplexes today at hand, I asked Shiva if she wanted to come and speak with me. She said she did not because she already waited 1 year and she did not want to delay this by another 5 minutes. So we are in such a haste for this to happen. And we really love the proposal. Of course, we do have some complaints, but I'll come to that later. Phenomenal work staff, you really worked hard for this, and we would be the first municipality in the region to allow not just fourplexes, but also 4 stories. And we are probably the only one in the entire province. So this is great. We are living up to our city's reputation. This is a very ambitious proposal. Wholeheartedly support it. And like Tyler mentioned, the 3plexes are not as feasible, and the 4plexes make the development more feasible. Imagine if we allowed 6plexes. Imagine if we allowed 8plexes. It's going to become much more feasible, and housing is going to become much, much more accessible. I do not want to take up much more time. We are going to Ethel's after. You all are welcome to join us for happy hour. We are going to celebrate this. I am absolutely confident that this is going to pass tonight. Thank you so much for the hard work, staff, and thank you, council, for your leadership on this. And I've set a record today. I have not complained, because every time I'm here, I complain a lot. No complaints today. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Any questions for Ashwin?
I just wondered, Ashwin, if you're at Ethel's, if Mr. Ashfield's going to come, if you're inviting him as well.
Everyone's welcome. Let's celebrate this historic moment.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? Please come forward. If you could just state your name and municipality of reference, of residence.
Yeah, Phil Marfisi, and I am from Waterloo as well. So good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm immensely pleased to see the recommendation to allow 4 units and 4 stories as of right across Waterloo, as many others have been saying. You have a chance tonight to approve a change that will bring us in line with other progressive cities across Canada who are choosing to truly tackle our housing crisis, although I will say a lot of them are not doing the 4 stories, so we're going a little bit beyond. And also fulfill the spirit of the Housing Affordability Fund agreement we signed with the federal government, which I also think is something that we should bear in mind, because there are cities that chose not to go with that agreement, or have not been as ambitious with that, and I think it's really cool that we're kind of going further with it. This initiative is vital and interconnected with many of the city's strategic goals. The city has chosen to maintain its countryside line, which means we have to prioritize infill. Increasing density helps us to support walkable neighborhoods, and I'm going to skip over a few other things I'm going to say because we talk about it a lot. Allowing 4plexes is not a panacea. It is just one piece of a larger puzzle. There's still a lot more we can do, and this is one step along that path. And now I hate to talk about something that I think that could be improved possibly moving forward. I know I hate to be the one to do this because everyone else has been so glowing, and I really love this proposal. There's one concern I have, and that is, it is encouraging to see the city reducing parking minimums, but I think we can better unlock the full potential of small multiplexes if we eliminate them entirely. Parking minimums increase the cost of building, which eventually has to be included in rental prices. That is, rental or ownership prices could be lower without them. Requiring higher levels of surface parking also increases the amount of hard surfaces in the city. There's been a lot of chatter tonight about stormwater management, and this is something that I think we should really keep in mind with that. We know that climate change is bringing stronger rainstorms to us, and anything we could do to mitigate this should be a key consideration. I won't go too in depth. You've heard lots about parking minimums from me and a lot of other people. But when some, so I just wanted to say, when some students from the University of Waterloo gave a really thorough presentation regarding their corrosive effect on getting housing built and meeting our climate goals a few months ago, I'd just like to echo something that was discussed then. The cities that are making some of the most progress on getting housing built have eliminated them across their cities. Getting rid of them doesn't mean that parking doesn't get built, but it increases the financial feasibility of projects, and I want to emphasize that this also includes affordable housing developers. I'm not just talking about for-profit developers here. That's a lot of concerns that people often have, but this is also benefits nonprofit or public housing. I recognize we may not be ready to take this step yet. So you should approve this, absolutely, tonight. But it is my hope that we can comprehensively look at ways to address this more moving forward.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the delegate council? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this application today? Okay.
Yeah, I'm another regular, I'm afraid. I wasn't going to come tonight, honestly, because I'm really excited about this. This is really, really great. And you know why I like it? Because it saves farmland, right? We're intensifying here, so I'm really, really happy about that. And I'm happy because we are creating the density that can support transit. But like right now, I'm totally with Councillor Hamner and I'm sure the rest of you too. Like parking is a big challenge here. So I don't want to get rid of the minimums right now, but I'd like to think, I mean, it's really exciting, the possibilities that could come out. Like, I think, what if we had, like for new developments, they had to give people bus passes as a consideration of getting a building permit or something, you know? And then we had on-demand buses, you know, like they have in Kimberley, BC, I noticed that. And apparently we've been doing it out in the rural areas. So I think there are some creative solutions, but they're not ones that individuals can necessarily take. The real reason I came tonight was I read through the entire package, and thank you so much for putting all the comments and replies from Engage Waterloo. And I came to the engineering concerns about the implications of allowing greater lot coverage. And again, this comes up to Committee of Adjustment from time to time. Peter Wollstonecroft, my colleague on the committee, raises it every time. And it really makes an impact to me. And I think, you know, when you think about the storm events we've had, Toronto, BC, Spain, you know, those are huge, you know. And so if we allow more lot coverage, that increases the ability of the rain to sink down into the ground. And we are built on a moraine here. There's a lot of slopes. Some of them are bigger than others, but there are a lot of slopes in this city, and people, you know, from one lot drains down to another. So it's a real concern, I think. And I'd really like us to see the recommendation from engineering that consideration should be given to introducing zoning regulations that would require a minimum landscaped area, so the minimum level of stormwater infiltration can be achieved on each lot. Because whether you have a house a building that's going the maximum size or not, you know, like in my neighborhood, there's a number of them that are not on the maximum allowable, but they just paved the backyard, you know, they put in a cement patio, they paved the driveway that used to be gravel and so on. So it's a complicated problem, and I think we have to look for creative solutions to it. But I would really like to see something picked up on the engineering recommendations, because I think it's really important, and I think it's the one that, you know, parking's going to annoy people, but when your house is destroyed by a flood, that's another thing, and I think they won't thank the city people kindly for allowing that to happen. So that's my input for tonight.
Thank you, Kay. Any questions for Kay? No? Okay, thank you. Question for staff based on the delegate.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'm wondering if somebody could speak to the 45% that is indicated in the engineering reports, and what impact that would potentially have on the feasibility of fourplexes, given that in the current bylaw, I think that it says 30%, so that would be a 15% increase on the minimum.
Through you, Chair Freeman, I'll maybe take that question for Councillor Wright. Thanks, Councillor Wright. And to your earlier comments this evening about stormwater management, you're correct that there is a risk here that we could see neighbor-to-neighbor concerns about runoff and some other, unwanted effects when we increase the impervious coverage. My understanding is that the province has given direction on that particular number. We have traditionally in the city of Waterloo, particularly on the west side, have had impervious coverage limits, and I think they've served us fairly well. But wherever we get into these types of hardscaping or increasing or limiting the ability of infiltration, what it's going to take is further work by the Engineering Services Division to look at that pre to post water balance. So allowing a conventional form of construction is probably not going to be sufficient. We are going to need to look at additional measures such as rear yard soakaway pits, rainwater harvesting cisterns, those types of things. Unfortunately, this proposal comes after our last update of our stormwater management plan. I think there's room now and as Mr. Reyes mentioned to council this afternoon, there is room for us to open that plan up and see what we can do more broadly to allow greater infiltration, such as in the right-of-way and boulevards, even under roads. We've done that. Councillor Bodley's ward, there's some roads many years ago where we tried infiltration galleries under roads. They work, but the problem is they're expensive. You have to wait until the road's going to be reconstructed. There's additional maintenance concerns for the municipality. But I think it's part of this evolution to now enable this type of housing typology and still achieve the pre to post water balance that, as Kay mentioned, is certainly a concern to us and is a concern to the Grand River Conservation Authority and others. So we do have to look at that aspect pretty comprehensively.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here this evening that would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, if there's no more delegations, this formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Councillor Bodley.
I have some comments, but I'm happy to move the motion. Whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved, one, that council approve report IPPW 2024-045, and two, that council approve city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment Z-24-05, 4 units, 4 stories, as set out in Appendix A of IPPW 2024-045.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Comments? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Freeman. I wanted to echo just something Mayor McCabe had noted, and I really appreciate, as when the motion was put forward back last year, that some of the examples of what these look like already existing in our community. I think that's really helpful to see. But not only do those exist, but when we, as Mayor McCabe noted, when we walk through our neighborhoods, we are seeing far more other housing choices as well, and often these are less visible. We're seeing more and more multi-generational households. We're seeing more and more co-housing arrangements. It's already happening in our community, and we don't regulate the function of this current built form that is existing in our community where it's informally happening. And of course, with those development choices, those housing choices that people have made, there are impacts that occur, be they parking or otherwise. And it's incumbent upon the city to mitigate those as best as we can. But I wanted to thank staff for some very effective engagement with the community at large and with industry to help craft this zoning bylaw amendment in a manner that not only permits fourplexes in the city of Waterloo, but also enables them and encourages them through thoughtful and carefully considered amendments around parking, height, floor space area, and more. And my hope is that over time we will continue to monitor the uptake in the city and tweak the zoning bylaw around ARUs to further enable them over time. I'm not going to fully reiterate all of the statistics that we see in our community around the need for this council to tackle the affordable housing crisis. We've done that ad nauseum in many weeks, and I do think it's important that the community know, though, that 4 units and 4 stories, this is a tool in our toolbox to help us deal with the affordability of housing, particularly given the fact that simply the number of new units being built in the region are not keeping pace with the staggering population growth that we are facing. But indeed, this council, we have been laser focused on doing everything we can to tackle this crisis. Since the original 4-unit, 4-story motion was put forward back in October of last year, we furthered our work on streamlining development applications. We've continued to work on our affordable housing strategy. We've leveraged that Housing Accelerator Fund money to help us in this work. Just last week, we approved 2025 University Ave alongside phase 1 of our OP, which contemplates increasing heights in MTSAs, new minor neighborhood corridors, and more. Also, this council has reiterated our commitment to the countryside line. In order for us to maintain that commitment, we're going to need to ensure that we are efficiently utilizing our space within our urban boundary. So alongside increasing height in our MTSAs, as we signaled last week in our OP, this really indicates a strong yes and approach to ensuring that we are preserving our rural urban fabric, protecting our farmland and our groundwater. So I'm really excited about this zoning amendment, and I was really happy to see so many delegates come out and share their excitement with it as well too. And I'm really eager to see how it gets implemented. I believe that this is going to not only increase supply, but crucially, it's going to increase housing choice in our neighborhoods and signal that our neighborhoods are not exclusive. All family types and residents are welcome in our neighborhoods, while also preserving the low-rise built form of our neighborhoods. So I'm really happy to see this moving forward, and appreciate all of staff's hard work on this. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. We're moving on to consideration of notice of motion given at a previous meeting. There is none. Notice of motion? None. Communications and correspondence, there's none. Unfinished business, none. Questions, council? Councilor Wright.
Hi, thank you. Through you, Chair. I've been wanting to ask this question for a long time, and I may have asked it outside of council chambers. So when we do our reporting on how many residential units we have in the pipeline, we have this nice number of about 9,600 or something like that. I have this burning curiosity to know how many of those are 1-bedrooms. And so if staff could just give us a breakdown at some point, I think it would really help us better understand what that ratio is like. Like I think there's 40 tower applications that have been submitted since we started this term of council. That is a heck of a lot of housing, and I think we need to get a feel for what kind of housing that is.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Arnson.
Through you, Chair Freeman. Thanks, Councilor Wright, for your question. And as a matter of fact, we've asked our building standards team to compile some statistics for council. So thanks for your patience. We'll get them, and I'm sure it'll be useful information.
Thank you. Any other questions, council? Seeing none, new business. Councilor Hanmer.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I want to share a little story. As preparations for Christmas tree lighting and figure skating or skating on our city center ponds were being made last week, 78 elite female hockey teams from all over North America arrived at our great city to compete in the coveted US-Canada Cup. The competition was fierce and spectacular to watch. Well, that was until Saturday, when the weather had different ideas around the driving and began to play havoc. Sadly, a hydro pole was hit, and Rim Park and surrounding neighborhoods were plunged into total darkness. Our generator came on about 15 seconds after it was pitch black. Most importantly, and I'd like to give a shout out to the customer service, security, and custodial staff who were on at Rim Park that evening. They acted with calmness, professionalism. They were focused on the safety and well-being of everyone in the facility, while trying to help 2 tournaments problem solve so the tournaments could keep going. In addition to hockey, we also had a volleyball tournament going on. So a special thank you to Laura, Chris, Nathan, Taylor, Ryan, Malcolm, Everett, Abdul, Dawn, and Danny, who acted above and beyond in making sure that everyone was safe and we were able to continue with the tournament. So thank you. And Canada won.
Thank you for that. And other new business, Council? Councillor Wright.
Just two quick little bits. So one was we had a successful tree lighting in the square. There's so much preparation that goes into those events, including getting the rink up and running and making sure that the square looks fantastic, to all the efforts that the BIA put into getting the markets up and going at Arista K9, at 35 King, over at the Bauer Lofts. Just a tremendous amount of teamwork that went on to make that happen. So our deep appreciation for that. And then I did have a second thing. Oh, yes. Winter arrived, right? So just a big shout out to our transportation team for the switchover, because having grown up in a snow business, everything breaks. And so I just want to give them our utmost empathy for that whole process and to thank them for getting the roads in good shape for us over the course of many snowfalls.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I did want to mention that Herb West Community Centre is having a holiday gift donation drive. I think we're all acutely aware that there are members of our community that are facing financial hardship, particularly at this time of year. So if anyone is interested, you can certainly reach out to me or directly to Jordan at Herb West, and they will be accepting donations up to December 19th.
Councillor Vasek.
Thanks, through you, Chair. I have a not as eventful but similar thank you to recreation staff at the Waterloo Memorial Complex, my kids in water polo, and the local water polo team hosted a provincial championship a couple weekends ago at the Memorial Complex, and it was just seamless, fun, and thanks to your staff. And then the second thing I wanted to say was I had a meeting with a advocacy group called Put Food Banks Out of Business last week, and it's hosted by the Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank, which is like a weekly pop-up, it sounds like. But he has started to amass support from other food bank leaders to advocate in the next federal election for a basic income, with the goal being to put food banks out of business. So anyways, I'd encourage you to check it out, and he'd be glad to meet or make connections with any of your networks, I think, who might be able to advocate alongside him.
Thank you. Councillor Bonley.
Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman. I wanted to give a shout out to the Laurelwood Neighborhood Association on Saturday. They also hosted Christmas tree lighting at the fire station number 2. Appreciate all of the help from all the volunteers, all the folks from the fire department for helping out there as well too. It was a really great event, and just a funny story from there. I was talking to a very small child about, hey, we're going to light the tree, and she was really hesitant, didn't want to go see the tree, was very concerned. I was like, why don't you want to go see the tree get lit? And it became clear that she thought lighting the tree meant lighting it on fire. So maybe we need to monitor our language around how we talk about tree lightings in the future. But I assured her no trees were lit on fire. The lights look beautiful, and everybody was happy. So it was a great event. Thank you.
Any others? I just wanted to take a moment and recognize that between our last council meetings, December 6th happened, and it is the National Day of Remembrance on Action on Violence Against Women, and it's just a very important day in my engineering career, and so I just wanted to recognize that there was a service in Councillor Vasek's ward where we remembered the 14 women who were killed just simply because they were women. And also all the other Indigenous lives that have been lost and other women that find themselves in violence. We were reminded at at the service of the number of calls of service in Waterloo region, which were extraordinary. It was, I think the number was 644 response calls to domestic violence in Waterloo region, and that we need to recognize that only 6% of individuals make the phone call. So I don't want to end on a sad note, but I do think it's really important for us to recognize that that day happened and that it's a very powerful day. With that, we're on to enacting bylaws. Councillor Bodley, did you want to move that? Looking for a seconder. Councillor Roach, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. We are on to adjournment, and if you'll allow me, I just want to say thank you, Council, for the reaffirmation of the budget earlier today. I think that it continues to serve the city of Waterloo really well, our 3-year budgeting process. And it was a great council meeting today, so thank you. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowe. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you so much.